The cold stone walls of the Threx Dominion prison were a far cry from the warmth of Earth's sun. Lieutenant Mara Vance was shackled to a chair, her arms stretched out wide, as if she were a broken-winged bird. Sweat beaded on her forehead, her breath shallow but steady. The bright, blinding lights overhead cut through the darkness like daggers, burning her retinas. Each breath she took tasted metallic, thick with the stench of fear. "Tell us, human," the Threx commander growled, his voice a guttural rasp. His 4 red eyes gleamed down at her, filled with a twisted sense of amusement. "Where is your fleet? Where are your reinforcements?" Mara's eyes were half closed. She had endured hours of their interrogation, painful, relentless, and cruel. Her body screamed, but her spirit remained unbroken. The Threx, a violent race of conquerors, believed themselves superior to all. In their eyes, humans were insignificant, easily crushed. But Mara knew better. She'd been trained for this. Her mind, sharp as a razor, had been honed by years of diplomacy and survival. She wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of breaking her, not even for the lives of her comrades. A sharp jolt of electricity surged through her body, ripping a cry from her throat. Her vision blurred as her muscles spasmed uncontrollably. The pain was unbearable, yet she refused to scream. Her mind focused on the most important thing: the mission. Peace talks were supposed to have started today. The fate of humanity's future with the Threx depended on this. "Where is the fleet?" The commander's voice was now a low, rumbling growl. He circled her like a predator, the sound of his claws scraping the metal floor sending chills down her spine. Mara forced her eyes open, struggling to hold his gaze. Her lips trembled, but no words came. She refused to tell them. They could do whatever they wanted, but they wouldn't break her. Then something inside her snapped. Another surge of electricity. Her body went rigid, and her vision faded to black. Silence. For a long moment, there was nothing. No pain, no light, no sound. Just the quiet, the stillness that surrounded her like a deep, endless void. And then, Mara gasped. It was as if the universe had slammed her back into existence. Her lungs burned as they filled with air. The cold metal floor was gone, replaced by something softer. The air was different. Her chest heaved, and her vision slowly cleared. Her hands, still bound, were trembling. She could feel the shift, the change inside her. Something had happened. She wasn't the same. The pain from before was gone, replaced by a strange, pulsing energy that surged through her veins like fire. She didn't know how. She couldn't remember. But she was alive. Alive. The room around her was quiet, the oppressive weight of her imprisonment gone. She should have felt fear. She should have felt disoriented. But instead, something else surged within her, a sense of power. Mara's heart pounded in her chest as the realization hit her like a thunderclap. She wasn't just alive. She had come back, and she would make them pay for everything they had done to her. One by one, her captors would fall. Mara's eyes snapped open, her breath ragged, as the echo of her revival reverberated through the cold chamber. The sounds of her own heartbeat were deafening in her ears, every pulse vibrating through her body like a drumbeat. Her chest rose and fell, each breath coming in jagged gasps, filling her lungs with air that tasted strange, like the remnants of something burning. Her hands, still shackled, tensed, the metal digging into her wrists. But the pain, the sharp bite of the chains, was nothing. Her mind was clearer than ever, sharper, as though a veil had lifted, revealing the world in startling clarity. Her senses exploded to life, each sound, each flicker of light, every subtle shift in the air, now as vivid as if it had been whispered directly into her mind. The walls of the prison cell loomed around her, the dull stone a stark contrast to the pulsating energy that thrummed through her veins. The familiar smell of old iron and sweat filled the air. But now, there was something else. A strange, metallic tang that seemed to pulse with every beat of her heart. She felt different, stronger. Her fingers flexed around the chains, the rusted metal creaking as if it feared her touch. With a single, swift motion, Mara tore them apart. The sound of the links snapping echoed through the chamber, an unsettling, final sound that carried with it an air of finality. From the shadows of the dimly lit room, figures stirred. At first, it was slow, as if the world had paused for just a moment to take stock of what had happened. But then they moved. The Threx guards who had surrounded her in the past now shifted warily in the dark corners of the room. Their yellow eyes blinked, their breathing shallow. They hadn't seen what had just happened. They couldn't know. They were still underestimating her. Mara's hands brushed the sides of her uniform, adjusting her posture as she stood up. A strange, unshakable calm settled in her chest, as though she had been reborn, her body now tuned to something ancient and untouchable. It was instinct, she realized. The predator inside her had awakened, the dormant edge of humanity's survival embedded deep within her DNA. Without a word, she turned. The closest guard, standing just a few feet away, never had time to react. Her foot lashed out, connecting with his chest. The force was too much. His body crumpled, slamming into the stone floor like a ragdoll. Mara barely blinked. She didn't even break stride. Another guard lunged, his clawed hands reaching for her throat. She was faster. Her body moved before her mind even caught up. She twisted, grabbing his arm and twisting it with bone-crunching force, a sharp snap echoing in the air. The Threx let out a strangled cry before slumping to the floor, unconscious. Her eyes scanned the room. More were coming. They were scared now. Their heavy boots thudded against the stone, a chorus of panic that only fueled her. She was a force of nature now, something they couldn't understand. Mara's fingers curled into fists, a quiet satisfaction surging through her as she moved into the shadows, blending into the darkness like a shadow herself. One by one, they fell. Silent, swift, and without mercy. She didn't need to say anything. Her actions spoke louder than words ever could. The Threx were learning a lesson the hard way. Humanity was not to be underestimated. The sound of footsteps echoed through the corridors, sharp and urgent. Mara's breath was steady now, the air cold but comforting as it filled her lungs. She moved through the shadows with purpose, her senses on high alert, every sound amplified, every detail clear. She could hear the distant hum of the ship's systems, the slight scrape of a guard's boots, the rhythmic clang of a door opening. Her mind was a razor-sharp blade, cutting through the chaos. The Threx were scrambling, panic spreading like wildfire. Their eyes darted in every direction, but they couldn't see her. She was already 2 steps ahead, her instincts guiding her with an eerie certainty. The ship was vast, its corridors stretching endlessly, a labyrinth of cold metal and harsh lights. But she had learned their patterns. She knew how to move in the dark. A flicker of movement caught her eye. She turned quickly, her hand reaching out to catch the wall and pivot in one smooth motion. A guard, larger than the others, charged toward her, his body a mass of muscle and fury. He swung a heavy baton, but Mara was already gone, her body sliding to the side with a fluid grace. She felt the air shift as the baton missed her by inches, the guard's momentum carrying him forward. Without a moment's hesitation, she countered. Her foot swung out, connecting with the side of his knee with a sickening crunch. The Threx staggered, his leg collapsing beneath him. He roared in pain, but Mara was already on him, her hands grabbing his throat with unnatural strength. His claws swiped at her, but she was faster, ducking beneath his wild strikes and tightening her grip. He gasped for air, his struggles growing weaker with every passing second. Mara's eyes burned with cold resolve as she squeezed, feeling the life drain from the brute beneath her hands. The Threx's body went limp, his dark eyes glazing over. She dropped him like a broken doll, her chest rising and falling with the rush of adrenaline. She wasn't even winded. The ship groaned beneath her, the metal creaking like an old dying beast, but she was far from done. She had only just begun. She moved onward, her footsteps light and purposeful. Ahead, the command center loomed. It was where the real danger lay. The Threx commander, Servok, was there. He had been the one to order her capture, the one who had sentenced her to torture. Mara had heard his voice too many times, his cruel, taunting tone as he laughed at her suffering. She was coming for him now. She had to. The door to the command center slid open with a soft hiss, and she stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, the glow of the control panels casting long shadows. At the center, the commander stood, his back to her, his massive form silhouetted against the lights. "Mara Vance," he said, his voice low and menacing. "I thought you would be dead by now." Mara didn't respond. She didn't need to. The only answer she had for him was the swift, brutal force of her body as she lunged forward, her fist striking with the speed of a comet. The battle had just begun. Mara's senses were on fire. Every breath, every movement felt sharper, clearer. She was no longer just surviving. She was hunting. The hunger inside her had awakened, an ancient part of her that had been dormant for centuries, now unleashed in the depths of her soul. Her mind was a predator's, calculating and precise, every step forward a methodical choice in a deadly game. The command center was quieter than it had been moments before. The Threx were on edge now, their smug confidence replaced with suspicion and fear. They had underestimated her, thought her death would break the human will. Instead, they had unleashed something far worse. A low growl rumbled from her throat as she moved through the darkened hallways. There were more of them, more guards, more sentries, more traps set to stop her. But Mara had already adapted. She was faster than any of them could imagine, her body moving with a fluid grace that was impossible to track. It wasn't just her training. It was something else, something primal and terrifying. She had become a force of nature. A loud crash echoed from behind her. A group of Threx soldiers, large and heavily armored, stormed into the corridor. They were a wall of muscle and weaponry, each one carrying enough firepower to turn a human into ash. But Mara didn't flinch. Her eyes narrowed as she gauged their movements, calculating their weaknesses, their hesitation. She darted into the shadows, her body blending with the darkness, a specter of vengeance. The soldiers spread out, their claws clicking against the metal floor, their sharp eyes scanning the area. They were looking for her, but they wouldn't find her. She was already behind them. A quick, silent movement. Mara's hand reached out, her fingers wrapping around the nearest soldier's throat. He didn't even have time to scream as she spun him around and slammed his body against the wall with a bone-crushing force. The others turned just in time to see their comrade crumple to the ground, lifeless. Before they could react, Mara was already in motion. Her foot swept out, knocking one soldier off his feet. She launched herself into the air, her body twisting and contorting with deadly precision. In an instant, she was on top of another, her knee driving into his chest, sending a shockwave of pain through his body. The last soldier charged at her with a roar, swinging a massive energy blade. Mara didn't hesitate. She ducked beneath the strike, her body moving like a shadow. Her hand shot out, grabbing the soldier's wrist and twisting, snapping the blade from his grasp. With a quick motion, she drove the edge of her hand into his throat, cutting off his air supply. The soldier dropped to the ground, unconscious. The corridor was silent again, save for the faint hum of the ship's machinery. Mara stood alone in the midst of the fallen bodies, her chest rising and falling with the rush of battle. Her hands were slick with sweat, her heart pounding in her ears. She wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. She was fighting for something more, something deeper. And now she was ready. Ready for the final confrontation with Servok, the Threx commander who had broken her, who had pushed her to this point. Mara's eyes burned with a cold fury as she continued her march forward. The hunt was almost over. The prey was close. The metallic doors of the command center slid open with a quiet hiss, revealing the heart of the Threx ship. Mara stepped in, her footsteps heavy with purpose, her eyes fixed on the towering figure at the center of the room. Servok, the Threx commander, stood before a massive holomap, his four glowing eyes scanning the projection of their fleet. His back was turned, but Mara didn't need to see his face to know the smirk he wore. He thought she was dead. They all did. But now, as she approached, her presence was undeniable. The cold weight of vengeance hung in the air like an invisible storm, and Servok could feel it. "Ah, Mara Vance," he said without turning, his voice rich with mockery. "I had hoped you would stay dead. It would have been far less troublesome." Mara didn't answer. She didn't need to. She could feel the tension thickening, the air humming with the anticipation of the fight. She wasn't here for words. She was here to end this, once and for all. She crossed the room, her movements silent, a predator closing in on its prey. Her mind raced as she thought through the plan Elias had sent her, encrypted, hidden within the very body she had turned into a weapon. The humans weren't just here to rescue her. They had a far more critical mission. Diplomacy was no longer an option. "Where is your fleet, Commander?" she finally asked, her voice cold, deadly. She stepped closer, the click of her boots echoing in the silence. Servok slowly turned to face her, his smirk replaced by a flicker of unease. His eyes locked with hers, and for the first time, there was a shadow of doubt in his expression. "You still think diplomacy is an option? After everything I've done to you?" Mara didn't blink. "You've done nothing to me. You only made me stronger." A sharp laugh echoed from Servok's throat, but it quickly died as he saw the deadly intent behind Mara's gaze. He stood taller now, his massive form swelling with pride. He was no longer sure if he could win this, but his arrogance made him believe he could still intimidate her. "I will destroy you," Servok growled, taking a step forward. His claws flexed, and the air seemed to crackle with the raw energy of his presence. Mara didn't move. Instead, she took a breath, steadying herself. She knew Servok's weakness: arrogance. The Threx relied too much on their strength, their numbers, their raw power. He was underestimating the one thing that had always made humanity dangerous: the will to survive against impossible odds. "We both know," Mara said, her tone slicing through the room. "This is no longer a negotiation. This is war." Her words hung in the air as she reached for the hidden implant near her chest. A series of quiet beeps echoed as she activated it, sending a pulse through the ship's system. Servok's eyes widened. He'd made a grave mistake. Across the galaxy, the human fleet, hidden just beyond the Threx's reach, was moving into position, their weapons primed. The peace talks were over. It was time for humanity to show the Threx just how far they would go to protect their own. Servok's eyes flicked to the holomap, his arrogance giving way to realization. "What have you done?" he hissed. Mara's smile was a razor's edge. "I've made sure you won't live long enough to regret it." The lights above flickered as the ship's systems shifted, and Mara lunged forward, her body a blur of motion. The Threx commander had never known the true meaning of fear until now. The room erupted into chaos as Mara moved. The sharp hum of energy weapons charging filled the air, followed by the sudden explosion of sound as a blast of electricity shot toward her. She ducked low, the bolt missing by inches as she surged forward, closing the distance between herself and Servok. The Threx commander bared his teeth in a snarl, his massive claws slashing through the air, aiming to tear into her. But Mara was faster. She slid to the side, her foot planted against the cold metal floor as she spun out of range. Her eyes never left him. Every muscle in her body was coiled, waiting for the perfect moment. "You should have stayed dead," Servok growled, his voice dark with fury. "You have no idea what you're facing." Mara's lips curled into a cold smile. "I faced worse." In the blink of an eye, she was on him, her foot sweeping low to take him off balance. Servok staggered but recovered quickly, his claws lashing toward her in a wide arc. She caught his wrist mid-swing, twisting his arm behind his back with a snap that made his bellow echo through the room. But Mara didn't give him time to recover. She drove her knee into his lower back, sending him stumbling forward. She followed up with a sharp elbow to the side of his head, and for a split second, his vision blurred. He was strong, too strong for most. But Mara wasn't like the others he had fought. The new strength pulsing through her was a force of nature, raw and unstoppable. Her body moved with precision and speed that Servok wasn't prepared for. Each blow landed with the brutal power of a storm. Servok spun around, his claws slashing wildly as he sought to land a hit. The air was thick with the force of his strikes, but Mara was a ghost, dancing around him with fluid grace. Every time he thought he had her, she was already gone, her movements a blur in the dimly lit room. Mara's breath was steady, her mind as sharp as ever. She had learned to read his movements, his patterns. His arrogance was his biggest weakness. He thought strength alone would win the day, but Mara knew something he didn't. Humanity's greatest strength was adaptability. Where Servok relied on overwhelming force, Mara relied on precision and strategy. Finally, she saw it, the opening she'd been waiting for. Servok, in his rage, had left himself exposed. She acted fast, grabbing his arm and pulling him forward into a devastating headbutt. The force of the impact sent him staggering back, blood dripping from the deep gash on his forehead. He growled, a deep, guttural sound that resonated through his chest. He was far from finished, but Mara wasn't about to let up. She was already on him again, her fist flying toward his chest with all the strength she had left. The hit connected, and Servok's body slammed into a nearby control panel, sparks flying as his weight crushed the delicate system beneath him. The room was silent for a moment, save for the hum of the ship's engines. Servok's massive form lay crumpled against the console, his breathing ragged. Blood poured from the wound on his head, his limbs twitching as his once immense strength began to falter. Mara stood over him, her chest rising and falling as she surveyed the wreckage. This was the moment that would end everything. "Do you see now?" she said softly, her voice cutting through the stillness. "This is the price of underestimating humanity." Servok's eyes flickered with a final spark of defiance, but Mara's grip on his throat tightened, cutting off any chance of a comeback. She had won. The control room lay in ruins, the air thick with the scent of burnt circuitry and scorched metal. Mara stood over Servok, her breath steady, her eyes locked on the fallen commander. His chest heaved beneath her grip, each ragged breath a reminder that he was still alive, still defiant. But for how long? She could feel the faint pulse of his heartbeat beneath her fingertips, the last vestige of his strength. "You think you've won?" Servok rasped, his voice a growl as blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. His glowing eyes burned with a dim, fading light, but there was no fear in them, only defiance. "You're nothing but a fleeting spark, human, a momentary fire. We, the Threx, will rise again." Mara's expression hardened. "Not today. Not while I'm still breathing." With one last forceful movement, she released her grip on his throat and stepped back, watching as Servok slumped against the shattered remains of the control panel. His clawed hands trembled, but he was powerless now, unable to rise again. His arrogance had cost him everything. Her gaze shifted to the blinking red lights on the walls, the warning sirens that had started blaring after their battle. The Threx ship was on the verge of collapse. The damage she had inflicted, combined with the human fleet's assault, was taking its toll. It wouldn't be long before the ship was lost, a smoldering wreck adrift in the cold depths of space. Mara turned, her boots echoing in the stillness as she began to walk toward the exit. Every step felt heavier than the last, the weight of the battle settling into her bones. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a strange emptiness, a deep exhaustion that gnawed at her. She had won, yes, but at what cost? As she reached the door, her mind flicked back to the people she'd left behind. Elias, the crew, The human fleet. They would be waiting for her. The mission wasn't over. She had come here for a reason. To bring down the Threx, to end their reign of terror. And now, that mission was complete. But it was only a small part of the greater war. The battle had been won, but the war was still out there, looming on the horizon. The door slid open, and Mara stepped into the corridor. The flashing lights of the ship's emergency systems bathed the hallway in a harsh red glow. The sound of distant explosions and the muffled hum of the human fleet's weapons made the walls vibrate, but Mara barely noticed. She was numb now, her body on autopilot, moving toward the nearest escape pod. It was over. The Threx were defeated, their flagship crippled. Her comm device crackled to life. "Mara, do you copy?" She paused, her hand hovering over the control panel. Elias's voice, gruff but relieved. The familiar sound of it grounded her, pulling her out of the haze of exhaustion. "I'm here," she replied, her voice low but steady. "Mission accomplished. We've won. We'll be there to pick you up in 5. Get to the escape pod." She didn't hesitate. She didn't need to. The fight was over, but the price of survival, of victory, was far higher than she had ever imagined. The escape pod was small, cramped, and surprisingly quiet as it drifted away from the wreckage of the Threx flagship. Mara sat alone in the pilot's seat, her fingers lightly grazing the control panel as she watched the debris field slowly expand behind her. The flames of the burning ship were now distant stars, fading into the inky blackness of space. The battle was over, but the quiet that followed felt heavier than the chaos. Her body ached, a deep exhaustion settling in her muscles, but she didn't mind. She had earned this silence. She had earned the space to breathe. The comms crackled again. "Mara, this is Elias. We're in range, preparing to dock. Stay with us a little longer." The familiar voice, gruff but warm, cut through the cold emptiness of the pod. She almost smiled at the sound, but it was faint, tired. She had become so accustomed to the weight of solitude during the mission that she almost forgot what it felt like to be connected to someone. "I'm here," she replied, her voice steady but weary. "I'll be ready." As the escape pod drifted toward the rendezvous point, Mara allowed herself a moment to think, really think, about everything that had led her here. The Threx, Servok's cruelty, the pain she had endured, the lives lost. It all played through her mind like a haunting melody. But more than anything, it was the faces of those she had fought for. The humans who had come together to put an end to the threat. She had fought for them all. The stars outside the pod glittered like scattered diamonds, but they no longer felt cold to her. They were beacons, distant markers of something greater, a future. Soon, the familiar outline of the human warship came into view, a sleek, formidable silhouette against the stars. Her heart gave a small, unexpected flutter. This was her family now. This was where she belonged. "Ready for retrieval," Mara said, her voice soft but resolute. She didn't need to check the readings or adjust her course. She knew the procedure by heart, and Elias would guide her in, just as he always had. The pod rocked gently as it neared the ship, the magnetic clamps of the docking bay reaching out to pull it in. Mara closed her eyes for a brief second, feeling the pull of safety. The ship's walls hummed as it enveloped her, the familiar vibrations a welcome comfort. The hatch opened, and the crew was waiting. Elias was there first, a relieved smile on his face. He stepped forward as she unbuckled herself from the seat, his hand outstretched. There were no words at first, only a shared understanding, the unspoken bond of those who had fought and bled together. Mara took his hand, her grip firm but gentle. The weight of the last few hours still lingered, but it felt different now, lighter. She had done it. They had done it. As the crew welcomed her back, her eyes drifted to the vastness of space beyond the windows. The war wasn't over, not yet. But in this moment, she could breathe. She could feel hope. Humanity had shown the galaxy what they were capable of. And Mara, for the first time in a long while, allowed herself to believe in a future that was hers to shape.